Donald Trump Jr. is hitting back at his critics in a new book.
It's titled Triggered: How the Left Thrives on Hate and Wants to Silence Us. In addition to being a new author, the president's eldest son is also an executive vice president at the Trump Organization and acts as a surrogate for his father's presidential campaigns. And I spoke to him earlier today about the divisive dialogue in America, the impeachment inquiry into his father, and much, much more. Take a listen. So the book is called Triggered: How the Left Thrives on Hate and Wants to Silence Us. Who did you write this book for?
Well, it's dedicated to deplorables. I figure after the years that we've been through, they're still with us, they stuck with us. But it's really for everyone. I mean, I talk a little bit about, so many topics that you've seen me talk about on social media, you've seen me on interviews, but there's only so much you can do in 5 minutes. Here I had 300 pages to really highlight my points, whether it be about social media censorship, which I've been talking about for 3 years, before it was a big thing, before it was really a Republican talking point. I get to talk about obvious, bias within the media. We've seen all of that, but I can go through example after example after example. I mean, just this week, right, with al-Baghdadi being an austere religious scholar rather than a guy that put people in cages and lit them on fire, murdering rapists. I get to go in through all of that. For me, I got to be the tip of the spear of the greatest political upset in history.
So when I went through this, I thought to myself, it does sound like your Twitter feed. It sounds like sort of a fleshed out version of your Twitter feed. And just like in your Twitter feed, sometimes you're a little trolly. There's some name calling in here. You call Mueller a feeble old fool. Yep. You called George W. Bush a loser. You said the squad should probably be called the Hamas caucus. And so, I know you're sort of giggling, because I think saying that you're kind of trolly is not an insult to you, right?
It's not, because the reality is this. Don't forget, I spent 2 years under investigation with Robert Mueller, right? I had half of the Democrats in Congress, probably all of the Democrats in Congress, half of Congress, period, literally saying I committed treason for taking an unsolicited phone call. But Hillary Clinton paying foreign operatives to get dirt, to then give to the FBI, who leaked it to reporters, who then used those stories to start the dossier nonsense and that entire investigation, that's not a problem. So when you've gone through what I've gone through over the last few years, you do actually have to push back, and I think my father has done that.
You have an incredible platform,
important.
right?
Yes.
You got like 4 million Twitter followers. Now you got sort of this book deal. One of the things that we talk about all the time, on CBSN, is about how divisive things have gotten, how the dialogue has gotten so sort of nasty. You have an opportunity to kind of change that with this book. You kind of maintain that. How do you sort of positively contribute to that?
I think any one of those chapters I could have taken much further and done something, sort of inflammatory, as opposed to taking a reasonable stance. Whether that be sort of, the chapter when I talk about, transgender aspects, when I talk about these sort of things, I can be live and let live. Although I'm painted as an alt-right neo-Nazi, the dialogue has to work both ways, right? When you have people on TV every day saying you committed treason, that's a big deal to me as an American. Okay, and so I don't disagree that people are inflamed, but the reality is there's a lot more people on the other side that are doing it, because the vast majority of the mainstream media is left-leaning. The difference is today they've just disregarded the pretense of objectivity. Now they're just like, okay, we're the marketing wing of the DNC. So for me, because I do have a big platform, and generally speaking, the Republican mantra until recently has been, well, we'll turn the other cheek, and we don't want to be the bad guys. You know what, guys? You have to fight back. When you believe in something, you have to. And Republicans have ceded ground to the left and to the radical left for decades.
But you don't think this sort of language just sort of contributes to this divisiveness?
Listen, I think it's a factor of today. I think without question. I mean, it is a factor of today. If everyone started doing that, that'd be fine. But when I look at my father and I look at the accomplishments, you see zero credit for it. You see all-time low unemployment numbers. Okay, no one's going to contest that for African Americans, Hispanic Americans, women, every demographic. You have all-time high business startups. You have your 401ks are through the roof. You have action on foreign policy. For the first time, we're actually having dialogue with North Korea as opposed to, he's getting things done, and he's doing it despite 95% negative media coverage. No one talks about. You guys actually covered it today, so it's the one time I don't get to say this, but no one talks about prison reform, okay? They don't talk about when he did that. That's not a Republican, that's not a Trump base issue. It's just the right thing to do.
So let me ask you about this, because I've heard your father say this at some of his rallies, right? Pointed out sort of all the great accomplishments, and you pointed out in your book too. And you know, one of the things he has said is, no one's going to impeach somebody like me. Look at what I've done for this country. So I want to ask you, this impeachment inquiry is grinding on. There are people that the White House have asked not to speak to Congress, and they've spoken anyways. Is your father concerned about this?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the reality is right now the problem with the process is you have Adam Schiff, you know, who's been talking about evidence of collusion for 3 years that no one else has seen. But he got on national TV, said he's seen things that are evident. Where'd it go? This guy who's been a known Trump hater is being judge, jury, executioner. He's deciding who can come in. He's deciding who can ask questions. It's a one-sided process. My father, he put out the transcript. He's for transparency. So when I see the Washington Post, their great headline, "Democracy Dies in Darkness," you know, that's wonderful, but they have no problem with this process going on in the basement of Congress where Republicans aren't allowed to ask questions.
So, but why isn't he concerned? Because, you know, whatever it is.
Because there's nothing there.
But it's not a walk in the park. Even there's nothing there, right? You guys say there's nothing there. This process is not a walk in the park. He's got to bother him.
You know, again, obviously he would love to get down to business. He would love to get USMCA passed. That's been on Nancy Pelosi's desk for 9 months. Okay, he renegotiated NAFTA, the thing that everyone, well, one of the many things that everyone said, you could never get that done. That's going to bring jobs back to this country. It will pass in 2 minutes with total bipartisanship, right? She won't even put it on their desks because she's worried that that would give Trump a boost. And that's the problem we're in. We're in a place where the Democrats won't do what's right for their constituency for fear that it will also give Trump a boost. And that's a sad place to be. If we did that and then focused on infrastructure, again, he's done things that are unprecedented and got it done despite this kind of hatred, despite the impeachment process starting really on November 9th, 2016, the day he won the election. I mean, 19 minutes after he was inaugurated, the Washington Post wrote the first article, "The Case for Impeachment." Give me a break.
All right.
This has been in the works forever. I mean, I see it yesterday. I was in D.C., so not exactly a stronghold of, you know, conservatives, right? Someone comes up to me, "You know what, Don? I'm pretty democratic, but I wish they just let him do his job." And I think that's what middle America wants. And again, for me, a big part of this book is that, yeah, I get it. I'm the son of a billionaire from New York, but my hobbies, my pastimes, all that stuff, they take me there. I have real friends there, not the token friend that you show up to, you know, for the Iowa caucuses, right? It's a little different. You know, those people feel the same way. They're excited to see wage growth going up for the first time in modern history. They're excited that their companies are employing people.
So listen, let me ask you about the whole, okay, so, you know, you talk about how the Washington Post is already writing headlines about the argument for impeachment, but right now what we're looking at is this allegation of a quid pro quo, right? This allegation that your father wanted the Ukrainian president or Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, and that would be advantageous to him. So I've heard you say that you wish your last name was Biden, because then you'd be able to travel the world and make all kinds of money and just sit on boards and whatever.
I could do that. Again, let me caveat it, and we get a little bit longer time to be able to do it in this form. And I've said this over and over. I am where I am, in large part because of my father's last name. The difference between me and Hunter Biden is we were international business people as a private business for 20 years. We didn't become magically international business people the day my father assumed a high office that he had influence, right? That's a distinction that the media is very selective about making. They don't talk about that. We stopped doing new foreign deals the second my father was elected, okay? We said we will not, for fear of possible impropriety, okay? Zero credit for that. Now, we have deals that we signed up in 2005 that we literally have a contractual obligation to finish. Okay, if we're in the middle of building a building
because
that we were
people see stuff happening in India, they see, you know, all kinds of other things.
Deals that we signed up before we got into politics. 100%. But we stopped doing any new deals for fear of that. Hunter Biden magically gets on a board of a business for $83,000 a month in a language he doesn't speak, a business he knows nothing about, when his father has some control over the region. That's a big distinction. We literally stopped doing international business was what I did in our company.
I understand.
And it allowed me to do a lot more campaigning and to write a book. But that's the distinction, and no one's making that. You know, I didn't get a board seat at Amtrak because of my father's taxpayer-funded office.
No, but how about this? How about
this,
though? Your father makes it a regular practice of staying at Trump properties that is paid for by taxpayers. People in the administration stay at Trump properties.
We literally give that up.
The free publicity, and you know, there's all this sort of talk about the amount of money that Ivanka and Jared have made while they've been serving in the White House.
Assets,
what do we call them? The
Ivanka
the trademarks, right? The Chinese trademarks that she was issued during a time when we're having a trade war essentially.
She applied for those trademarks years ago. Okay, there are people in China actively trying to utilize her trademark to put it on makeup. She literally, because she had a business. Unlike Hunter Biden, whose business was created because of his father's position, Ivanka, no one's going to contest this. Ivanka was an independent businesswoman for years. She did that. She filed those trademarks years in advance. People all over the world were trying to put her name and her likeness on products to pony off of her name. She's not doing new deals, but she is going to prevent people from taking advantage of that. But again, she filed all of those things years before we even got into the presidency. So she's not making money from it. She's just preventing other people from utilizing her likeness to do
So
that.
how about-
Again, a huge distinction that no one wants to talk about.
Well, how about the use of Trump properties for, for whether it's your dad
for
visiting
us, what
or
we've done, any foreign government that stays, we're literally writing a check back to the Treasury. We spend more money dealing with accountants than we could make from these jobs. Again, just to prevent even the notion of impropriety. And I'm glad we're getting to talk about it because the media selectively whitewashes all of this and they pretend like it doesn't happen. But we're spending time, like a Saudi national buys a cheeseburger at a hotel. We don't know that we have to literally try to figure out where they're from, make sure they're not affiliated with this, spend the time and money to, for a $15 cheeseburger. This is the length that we're going through. Again, that's not talked about. We've given up all of the profits coming from those kind of, we have a hotel in DC, right? DC is a pretty international city. An embassy from the UK. We'd like to use your ballroom. Nope, sorry, we gotta be able to give that money back to the Treasury. We're doing that. And by the way, we spend more money on accountants making sure that we're giving back that money to the Treasury. But again, no one talks about that. They just say, oh, you're getting rich because it happened. It's not true, and it's nonsense, and I'm glad we're able to dispel that.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Rudy Giuliani, right? Seeing as we were talking about the impeachment inquiry, that testimony's coming out now, his name's popping up over and over again. We used to see him a lot on television. We don't see him so much, so often. Is Rudy Giuliani an asset or a liability at this point for your father?
Listen, Rudy gets pretty hot. Like we see that, and he's a fighter. So I think generally speaking, he's an asset. I'm not involved as it relates to in the administration, so I don't actually know all of the details of what's going on there. Frankly, I know, what I see on the TV, and I got to put that through my own filter to assume what's actually true versus what's sort of, the DNC soundbite of the day. But listen, I think Rudy's been a fighter. He's been loyal, but I don't know enough about the details to know whether what he's saying is an asset or a liability in many cases.
I want to ask you a little bit about foreign policy and terrorism. Your father, we know he's the guy that gave the okay for the al-Baghdadi raid. He's also the guy that pulled U.S. troops out of northern Syria. He's also the guy that wanted to invite the Taliban to Camp David. What do those decisions tell us about his approach to terrorism and foreign policy? Which guy is he?
I think, listen, he's a guy that will have a dialogue to try to get something done. I think the best example is North Korea, right? Every day for the last few years, I've watched people, Trump's doing it all wrong in North Korea, and I know because I've been leading the U.S. delegation there for 40 years. 40 years, they haven't had a meeting with the other guy. They haven't had a dialogue. My dad doesn't think the Taliban are great, wonderful people, but hey, he may have a conversation with them to try to move that ball forward. Okay, all of our foreign policy, it's like Einstein's definition of insanity. Do the same thing over and over and over and expect a different result. It doesn't work. He's having that dialogue. So it doesn't mean he's best friends with Kim Jong-un. No one believes that, but the media, they're buddies because they're both dictators. I mean, give me a break. He's having the dialogue for the first time. It's nice to be able to have that dialogue, and he could go on TV and, in front of the world, try to destroy this guy, and then guess what? The dialogue is over. Or you can let it go, okay? And you can have a conversation. You can know what is the truth, but still have that channel open. And I think having that conversation is the most important thing in the world. And that goes for everyone. And, and he certainly doesn't get enough credit for that.
Yeah. Does your father take advice from anyone?
He will listen to everyone. My father, I think one of the interesting things that you probably saw throughout 2016, I mean, throughout the initial election was, he was able to relate to working class America, right? Very well. That wasn't because, he figured out something. It's because he spent his entire career as a builder. But he didn't just do that from, his glass office in Trump Tower. He went down on the job sites. He spoke with those guys. Hey, what do you think if we did this? Could we do it a little bit better, more efficient? What about this? Where are we wasting money? Where can we save money? He spent his entire career, 40 years, talking with those guys. So he will listen to everyone.
Because there's a sense.
It doesn't mean he's going to take everyone's advice. He goes from his gut, and it served him very well throughout his life.
Who gives him the best advice? Who does he just quiet down to and listen to?
I think he will listen to everyone, and then he will make up his own mind. But there's no one he won't listen to. He'll hear it. Some things he'll disregard right away. Some things
Does
he'll
he
take to heart.
value straight shooters? Does he value people who give him advice that's uncomfortable to hear?
I think without question. I think no one values, and frankly, no one is more of a straight shooter than my father. You see, I mean, what you see with him is what you get, despite sort of Donald Trump said this. It's like, well, play the tape, because in print things look a lot different than on the tape. On the tape, it's obviously a joke. In print, you change a question mark to an exclamation point, and you try to add a little bit of outrage, and all of a sudden they're two different conversations. I mean, I saw that so well. Donald Trump said this yesterday. I go, when? Well, in Michigan. I go, where? You, at the rally. I go, wait a minute, I was there. Well, he said something in minute number 1, something in minute number 7, something in minute number 43, and they blended it together like it was one thought on one topic when it's not even. So it's like, yeah, maybe he said those words, but that's totally not the context, And I think that's done everyone a disservice. It's done the American people a disservice, but I think it's also done the media a disservice, because I do believe they've lost so much credibility in sort of everything, every conclusion they jump to, anything that was bad for Trump, anything that's negative against Trump, it's like that 100% happened. Nick Sandmann, the kids from Covington Catholic, obviously he was a perfect target. He was a white Christian kid wearing a MAGA hat. Let's ruin his life because maybe he supports Trump. It was such a good narrative for the media and for what they wanted.
Listen,
that they jumped all over it.
Because I know you probably have a bunch of things to do. Now that you've sampled this whole political thing, think you're interested in diving in? You got this. You know what? They always write a book. They always write a book before they run.
They do,
right? And you're a pretty very welcomed warm-up act at these rallies.
Well, I appreciate that.
When you go up there, I mean, the crowd really responds.
Listen, I love doing it. I really enjoy it. I love seeing the difference that it's making in people's lives. My only focus for the next year is getting my father reelected, because I believe those policies are going to be good for America. Whether I decide to do something later, honestly, we'll see. It's too early to tell. I'm never going to rule it out, because then, in the age of sort of gotcha journalism, in 10, 15 years, sorry, other than you, obviously, in 15 years, you decide to do something. Oh, you said you were never going to do it. You're a liar. So I'm never going to rule it out. I like doing what I get to do right now. I like being with those. I don't know that I'd like the day job part of it, actually the policy side. Right now I'm helping those who are helping my father, because I believe that's what's good for this country, and I'll continue to do that. What happens after that, we'll see.
Donald Trump Jr., the book is triggered. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Great being with you.
Thanks.